the world will never be the same, having been left transformed forever by the nuclear hellfire that destroyed everything, with civilization becoming broken, warped, and all life would struggle to survive in the wake of the apocalyptic fallout. All that it took was one really bad day, when humanity's hatred dominated compassion and annihilation took precedence over conquest. In the 2 hours of nuclear exchange that took place on October 23, 2077, all the world's governments would fall or fundamentally change into cruel and oppressive dictatorships that sought to retain what little control they had by means of might and tyranny. For over 200 years, humanity has been pitted against trial after trial. The challenges that survivors faced had not been confined to the lack of resources available after the bombs had dropped, though that hindered things. Most survivors would fall victim to the toxins and abominations that would break free from their pre-war confinements, reaping. And so, we stand at the point of rebuilding. But is that even possible? So that's why today we're going to explore why Fallout's world never returned to normal after 200 years. The everlasting damage. Let's start with the land itself, because yeah, it's a mess. And I mean, it's not just damaged, it is in a state from which it is not coming back. The destruction is obvious anywhere you look, but it runs way deeper than that. The ground turned toxic, the water became deadly, and even the air feels like it's out to get you. If what you see around you isn't convincing enough, then take this as proof. Think back to your travels across the Commonwealth. I don't think you can't remember the glowing sea. Yeah, I can't think of a better example of a world that's just not coming back. Now, talking more in detail about this zone, well, the glowing sea is the impact site for one of the largest nuclear bombs dropped on the US. The zone where it hit Boston area the hardest damage, there's no contesting this. All that destruction left a wasteland that could never heal from the aftermath of the constant nuclear bombardment that had become the conclusion of the Great War. So here we are, 200 years later, it is still one of the most lethal places on the planet. We're talking radiation levels so extreme that even the factions with the most resources at their disposal avoid it at all cost. None linger there for long enough to face any extended exposure. So yeah, you can explore it, but at what cost? That's the real question. Honestly, it could have been this incredible aquatic zone packed with whatever nightmares are lurking beneath the surface, and at the same time, a perfect way to show just how deadly a radiation-soaked zone could be. Hopefully that makes it clear. This isn't just some old wound slowly healing, or a fresh cut that'll close up if you give it time. We're not even close to that point. That's an active, ongoing environmental catastrophe. Just imagine how much radiation could a zone hold. And well, you know that it is kind of obvious that water could be dangerous, but with that many years past and things this way, I think that we never will reach that state of recovering our oceans. And hell, we haven't even explored to see if a giant leviathan or something is underwater. Here's where things get weird. The glowing sea isn't just dangerous because of what's sitting in the ground, it's dangerous because of what it keeps spreading everywhere else. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense. Just because you can't see it happening in real time doesn't mean it's not radiation that is concentrated in a body of water isn't just gonna sit there quietly. None other than Todd Howard, executive producer and director at Bethesda Game Studios, confirmed in 2015 that those rad storms tearing through the Commonwealth had been born in the glowing sea. And yeah, we're not talking about a little thunder and some clouds here. We are talking about some giant and dangerous catastrophes spread through the jet stream that wreak havoc on any would-be civilization unfortunate enough to find themselves in the path of one of these green, crackling storms that irradiate everything they touch. Sadly, there wasn't a weather mechanic implemented by the time Fallout 4 released, but it would have been something really amazing in my opinion. Those giant rad storms that hit hard in the Commonwealth are originating from the glowing sea actively, and that poisonous water they release is going nowhere. So it's unlikely that in the next century or even millennium that it will improve, but there is hope. But that wasn't everything that Todd Howard had told us. He dug a bit more into detail and, well, to be honest, is there any better source of information than one of the creators themselves? Pretty much everything in the glowing sea is already dead and desolate, so imagine what happens when rain clouds roll in. Just in case anyone slept through the class, these clouds soak up the radiation that drifts across the area, and then dump it back down on everything below, kicking off a vicious cycle that, without any human intervention, pretty much never ends, and honestly, it's probably just going to make things worse over time. The glowing sea is actively poisoning the rest of the region on a weather cycle. Every single storm, every single week, month, even year, we don't know exactly when, but we know for sure that it will happen eventually, so our hands tied without some sort of massive radiation scrubbing device that could be used to cleanse the air and prevent the further spread of radiation. The radiation storms are only only part of a far greater issue, one that has led to the destruction of civilizations and will always be a cause for concern. How can you restore humanity to its former glory if you can't feed yourself properly? Food. Insecurity. Yeah, as simple as that. I know that you may take this as something obvious that is already solved in the wasteland, but trust me, it's not. It may last a while, but remember that we are trying to recover our world, and the world isn't exactly helping. If you have been wondering what question we're actually trying to answer here, the most obvious answer usually comes up. Yeah, it is all about the radiation and the damage from the explosions. Things that just can't be undone or fixed by a simple redo. On another angle, we can explain why the Fallout world can't recover just from other issues that happened because of the radiation, but don't have a way around, or at least I couldn't find one. And yes, I am not trying to say the contrary about radiation. It is completely impossible to say the contrary, as the radiation is, in simple terms, catastrophic. But now follow me here. We have other issues that also can contribute in negative ways, and that itself is a whole other story. The thing that actually makes rebuilding impossible on a practical day-to-day level isn't only the rads or even all the death that is around the wasteland. It can contribute, but no, it's the food. And it's very overlooked almost every time. So we need to address this problem. It's one of the most important to understand my point. You cannot rebuild civilization without food, and more specifically, without regular and reliable security that you're gonna get something on your plate after a hard day of labor. Not every empire is built to last, but to become an empire, you have to actually build up your people to last through the construction process. On a greater scale, every nation needs to have structure, and that structure needs a foundation to build off of. Things like water and food are simply not negotiable. The wasteland is a big place, so reducing the scope, in a small scale, every stable community in human history was built on a reliable agricultural base, a fact that cannot be ignored. If you want to be that bold and ignore the needs of your people, then you're welcome to try, take resource security, and everything else collapses. The greatest struggle is that the soil is contaminated, not just around blast craters, but basically everywhere. It's a problem that stagnated societal reconstruction across the entirety of the former United States. Grows in that soil will feed off of its nutrients and absorb any contaminants that it contains. This means that all the crops that wastelanders eat are contaminated in some way or another. There's no escaping that. Just think about it. The water that feeds those crops is irradiated. The animals that graze on those plants are irradiated. There are few clean resources naturally left in the food chain. Every single calorie counts. When you're trying to survive to the next day, your time has to be spent obtaining food and water. Think about it this way. A wasteland survivor has to pay in some way what I like to call a radiation tax on their body. You don't die immediately. You just get slowly, continuously worse. If you're not cautious enough and consume the wrong meal, you may die or become a ghoul. And then we have to talk about meat and livestock. That is very straightforward. There are plenty of Brahmin out there. Two-headed irradiated cattle that the wasteland runs almost entirely on. They've been in every game and are a bit scary in my opinion, but they're good boys. But they both help reduce the burden of labor and act as a food source. The Brahmin are the backbone of caravan companies. Every traveling merchant has one at their side. They are the perfect pack mall in a world without vehicles. Focusing on the food, the Brahmin are the primary meat source for most settlements, and the thing that even the most organized post-war factions depend on for protein. We don't have chicken anymore, but we can get some similar meat from other monsters, but I'm sure that the average settler won't be fighting a whole mutant for it. And so we start with bad news. Here's the kicker. Brahmins have mutated far beyond what they were before the war, plain and simple. They exist because radiation warped normal cattle into something new and a bit grotesque, with the two heads and everything. There are plenty of Brahmin ranchers out there, but they are by no means near the efficiency of the NCR's agricultural economy. The Brahmin ranchers feed their livestock by grazing on contaminated land. It's an unfortunate truth that we must accept for one of the most reliable resources in the post-apocalyptic world. I confidently can say that this is it. That's the ceiling. That's the best anyone has managed. Maybe we'll get lucky and some ranchers will tame a mutated hog, mole rat, or something that could provide a more stable resource that might be less reliant on irritated flora to sustain itself. Though there is one resource out there more important than food, as you can go 30 days without eating, but you can't survive a week without water. A resource so vital that nothing functions without it, but obtaining it is far from easy. The clean water. Getting water is even worse than the food situation. I know that we didn't discover the wheel, but it is important to point it out. Saying something. This is a major major concern even before megatons started to form or Shady Sands were the old, forgotten, almost ghost town. So this is not something new, but that makes the problem bigger than ever. More than 200 years later, and we cannot solve the problem. Good riddance, man. But a bit of context. Before the bombs, water came from reservoirs, treatment plants, municipal systems, all of it built and maintained by a functioning government with a functioning industrial base. Yeah, too much information, but this is similar to how the real life works. We got water in our homes and most of the people don't even care about it. Well, they don't until it's gone. Every single one of those systems exploded. Yeah, just like that. It's gone and no signs of coming back. Why is that? Well, that's pretty simple, actually. The infrastructure doesn't exist anymore, and what replaced it is either contaminated, controlled, or both. If you fancy some fresh day at the reservoirs of water, they will have armed soldiers on your best day, to super mutants, raiders, centaurs, or something worse, three-eyed fish. Just kidding, but anything in the water can eat you, actually. Now, talking about the vaults, they had water purification built in. Sealed, pressurized, driven by pipes straight to home, just like any delivery but express. This was some of the best pre-war technology had to offer, but humanity does not like what others have, so they had to blow everything up, and ironically, that didn't change. Before they wanted all the power infrastructure could give. Now they'll want that piece of solid rock because why not? And even those were failing within decades. Vault 15 had to open early, barely 20 years after sealing, specifically because its generators and water chip were straining under the population. The best water technology in the world, installed in a controlled underground environment, couldn't hold up for a single generation. That could be scratched up as a Vault Tech miscalculation or a calculation too perfect, we don't know with those people, but whatever the case, they couldn't hold on the water. On the surface, it's worse by every possible measure in case you were the only one thinking they had it better. The rivers are irradiated. Blue check. The rain carries radiation down from clouds that passed over blast sites. Double check. The groundwater absorbed contamination from soil that's been soaking in radioactive material for 2 centuries. Triple check. And we could go on and on this. But what's the point? For specifics, we could talk about something that the fans may be familiar with because I don't remember too much except for the ending, but talking about Project Purity in Fallout 3, it was the holy grail in the moment. It was built around purifying the Potomac River and pumping clean water out to the capital wasteland. The project took years over years with a cost that translated to much diverse currency. One of the most expensive ones was that it literally cost lives and was treated as a near miraculous achievement when it finally worked. And the goal? Straightforward and probably one of the noblest you could find in a world like this one. Providing clean water to one region temporarily was considered one of the greatest accomplishments in post-war history. Now fast forward, and this same river was tried to be used as a weapon by the Enclave, trying to inject a modified forced evolutionary virus. We all know the drill by now, but the story is the same. They tried to make something noble for the greater good into a massive weapon. Humanity itself is not right. New Vegas didn't get it any better, with the water distribution becoming a power struggle for control and well water distribution, with eventually 200 years later evoking a total all-war between factions where the NCR and Caesar Legion fought 2 major battles for Hoover Dam, different ideologies clashing, but not because of that, because of water. Poetic, to say the least. What we can learn from this is that if you can't solve food and water, nothing else matters. You can have the best government, the best moral, or the best intentions, hell, even the best military. You could be Jesus himself with the absolute cleanest, crystal clear intentions in the wasteland, and still someone will fight over it. Without a reliable food and water supply, you're just delaying the collapse, which is exactly what the NCR proved in the projections, and even if they could secure a major source that could last hundreds of years, the other side of the fence would try and take it or destroy it, making the most biggest and reliable tools a bigger target in your back. These resources are the most important when it comes to short-term survival. They are what enables the ability to sit aside time to nation build. Once food insecurity is solved, you can lift others up from being simple raiders and scavengers. But what if this was all for naught? What if the greatest minds alive got together and saw doom lurking in the future just down the road? Doomed future foreshadow? Even with a project so solid that we can conclude that is the ceiling to this world. In terms of limiting the scarcity of food, well, ring, bad news, this wasn't enough. The NCR's own Office of Science and Industry projected that by the early 2290s, famine would overtake the nation, and well, bad news, because we are talking about the type of society that is actually trying to rebuild something. But okay, we appreciate the honesty. Food and water production was expected to fail to keep pace with the Republic's growing population. This is a whole new world. world, and one that is quickly adapting to a new reality, not trying to rebuild what was destroyed, but trying to make the best of it. Because the numbers don't lie. They are running out of time. Urgency and planning never go hand with hand, so this wasn't a fringe concern or a worst-case scenario, was something that they are actively trying to dodge in the future. Sadly, to the moment we can see the latest in the wasteland. These problems aren't near solving phase. At most, they acknowledge them, and are trying to patch the most possible. For the projection itself, well, it was an official government projection that the administration was actively trying to hide from its citizens. I think that in this case is for the best, but at the same time, people that could have ideas of how to help will be oblivious to this, and maybe will die for a problem that was never showed until the bomb exploded. Basically, too late. The most successful civilization in the post-war West, with over 700,000 citizens and a functioning three-branch government, was quietly staring down a famine it couldn't stop. How you could rebuild something sturdy if you have a timer in your neck all the time. A timer that each moment can be thinner with the large of the population increasing in exponential numbers. Famine is not merely the only doom waiting for the NCR in the greater wasteland. The greatest scientists of the old world would create many horrors that wreck above on the wasteland even 200 years later. Not all of them were intentionally unleashed. Many were created with intentions pure, but in the nuclear fallout, they took new forms that has warped all life, unfortunate enough to meet its touch. The Enclave virus. Most people think of FEV as the thing that makes super mutants, and that's true, but that framing massively undersells how catastrophic the forced evolutionary virus actually is for any chance of recovery. Because FEV isn't contained in a lab somewhere, it used to be, but now is in the air with every one of us to a certain degree. Well, not that serious, but is so accessible for some bad dudes that is laughable how it is now and almost renewable. It isn't locked behind a vault door. It's in the environment. It has been since before 2077. Yeah, for those people that weren't in the loop. This virus was created before the war, so the super mutants aren't a product of this time. They were even before the bombs fell. And, well, too big. The damage is that even 2 centuries later is still actively mutating life in the wasteland. Even right now, it could be transforming a creature into something horrific and with zero containment and zero cleanup. The way it got to the outside world was some Resident Evil shenanigans. The West Tech Research Facility in Southern California was one of the primary FEV research sites before the Great War. When the bombs dropped, the facility was damaged. I know, kind of obvious, and well, the virus escaped into the atmosphere. That single-handedly fills the entire wasteland with a mutagenic agent that has been working its way through every living organism it contacts for years, decades, and even centuries to come. It isn't a problem from the past. It's an ongoing biological contamination event that nobody has the infrastructure to address. And to make things worse, the mutations it produces are irreversible. This is the part that breaks everything. FEV doesn't store an unaltered copy of the subject's DNA when it rewrites their biology. The transformation it causes is permanent by design. Theoretically, you could reverse a mutation by infecting the subject with a secondary virus containing their original DNA, but that requires having their original DNA on file and the technology to synthesize a tailored countervirus. When push comes to pull, it becomes very dark. FEV doesn't just make super mutants. The virus is so unpredictable and so aggressive that it produces completely different mutations depending on the strain, the host, and the method of exposure. The researchers who infected the water supply of Huntersville in Appalachia were trying to identify a reliable mutation strain, a good nod to all that became the forced evolutionary virus in the future years, something that even the 76 dwellers couldn't stop, and those dudes literally became the Christ of Appalachia, and the wasteland as a whole. What they got instead was people mutating into things that couldn't breathe, masses of retinal tissue, subjects whose teeth grew so large they pierced their own brains, others in such constant pain they terminated themselves. The scientists called this instability a problem to be solved. The wasteland inherited it as a permanent feature of the environment. The monsters created from the FEV are a very real threat. Their outward appearance is usually telling enough to make most wastelanders avoid them, though not all threats appear as a clear enemy, so threats build amongst your own number, wearing a human face. Damn you, politics. In a world where all sense of structure had been lost for generations, we're left with one simple rule: might makes right. Surviving in the Fallout world is very hard. This has made that group start to rise in order to be able to satisfy the necessities of the human being. But having more than one of these groups lead to fighting one another. As we have learned over the series of the Fallout games, there are always fights over the interest of the faction, fighting over territory, constant attacks over the other groups, and even sabotaging one another. How come you cannot remember all the bad things that you have made made, like cutting out the purifier for a whole civilization. Things like this make it really hard to have the civilization go back to normal. Think about it. Suddenly, the world has been reset almost to the Stone Age. In this new world, greed takes over your mind, and you have this great idea to become the only ruler of the world. Yeah, it is hard now that you think about it, but it can happen. Takes flies by, but you manage to create a group of followers that share your ideology. Now it is not only you have a mass of followers willing to do your bidding. Everything works fine until you encounter other factions that have different thoughts than yours. And now you are in conflict, fighting a small war against another faction, and only one may remain. All of this has been constantly shown in the Fallout games, like when the Institute deletes the Brotherhood, the Railroad, and the Minutemen. It is a non-stop cycle until one results victorious. But not only that, we have also known that they went and nuked other towns, and this, yet again, we have seen it in the game. So basically, everyone has interest, and it is okay, but how come you want the world to return to normal if you suddenly nuke a city? Not only the world is still recovering from the Holocaust, that was the war, you gotta go and nuke again the world. The consequences just scale up to a point there that place alone will never become the same. The nuclear after effects are very harsh, and to do it just because you wanted it, it is a pretty mess up. Not only in the game do we see this, even in real life, the political reasons are the main factor for territorial disputes, or even causing the people to make a mob and take places just because they do things that favor only themselves and ignore the hard workers. If this is a major flaw in today's world, just imagine in Fallout's world. In there, everyone wants a slice of the cake called Earth. Let's make aside the fighting with other people for political reasons. Now let's talk about fighting over resources for political reasons. We all know that resources are the holy grail in a post-apocalyptic world. And when you have a lot of resources, that makes you a powerful enemy or ally that depends on the raiders. Having this leads to an increased growth for the city and the prosperity of the people. But having so much resources makes you like the last water bottle in the Commonwealth. You are very attractive for raiders or other factions to just go all out and try to loot you, and that is another threat that you will need to face. Why are politics so hard? I guess it is not for us mere mortals. If this wasn't enough, the ones who have the power to make decisions are also the ones that make the world become this radioactive, harsh, living, and dangerous place. The main reason that ghouls, mutants, super mutants, and other creatures exist in this world is because of the political leaders that approved that nuking was a good idea. Well, it was for the creators of the vaults because they became filthy rich. And the cherry on top is that the political leaders also approved the horrifying experiments that were made in the vaults. These people don't have a heart. It is so frustrating to see all of what they did just to see how the people will evolve. Still, we haven't talked about the big elephant in the room, those crazy things that are waiting in every corner of the wasteland to eat you up. Yeah, the monsters. Many monsters became what they are today out of natural evolution modified through radiation. Though not all, there are creatures out there that are beyond anything we could imagine in our world. Many of these dangers were of design, created to kill and kill alone. The big old dangers. Before the Great War, the most dangerous things living in North America were bears, mountain lions, and the occasional rattlesnake. Apex predators, sure, but manageable ones. Ones that an organized human population could coexist with, work around, and when necessary, cull. The post-war world replaced every single one of them with something engineered specifically to kill humans as efficiently as possible. And unlike a bear, these things don't run when you fight back. In case you haven't got it yet, well, you're correct. We are talking about the Death Claws. In some manner of speaking, they are another face for the franchise, with many times being the centerpiece of marketing, and even in the TV series, they had a front page that was very interesting. They even had a hand at the ending of the second season. They being famous doesn't mean that they aren't the centerpiece of this problem. Standing approximately 15 feet tall, immune to radiation, with razor-sharp talons capable of ripping a human apart in a single swipe, and oh, surprise, surprise, they aren't a product of the Great War. It was a situation of time before they could start roaming around if they escaped, because they were created by the United States military before the Great War, specifically to replace human soldiers in close combat situations. Yeah, the Death Claws were meant to be controlled. Please tell me how that got on. And it doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. We have Mirelurks that are horrific creatures, but they are from this planet kinda mutated crabs and also snapping turtles from irradiated coastal waterways. These creatures are very territorial and have their own queens that also are enormous. So they pack quite a punch, psychological and physically. Kind of hard to beat that. If raiders don't do the trick with the territorial wars, well, they have colonized rivers, coastlines, and sewers across the eastern seaboard. If you don't fancy the waters, then then we have another selection for more dry scenery, the bloat flies, and just like the normal flies, they excel at something over all the possible skills that they can have. They are experts in carrying diseases. Radroaches infest every enclosed structure on the continent, and are a bit more hard to kill than the normal counterpart that we know. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that they are ridiculously big. What I am trying to explain here is that we don't only have big monsters here and there or super mutants roaming around. We are talking that the wasteland is an entirely different monster, and this monster made the entire ecosystem be something totally different. It was basically replaced from the ground up with something hostile, aggressive, and radiation resistant, in some places giant too, or obscenely grotesque. And then there are the super mutant behemoths, who are like the big bro of the already big super mutants. These tanks that are actually alive were created in the Vault 87 strain of the forced evolutionary virus, and the only studies they could do on them were that they keep growing indefinitely as they age. This also risks his own life because the ones that cannot hold that characteristic are a bit peculiar, die under the pressure. In the other hand, the ones who survive long enough can become creatures of the size of buildings and remember that they keep growing. These are generally primitive in their way of thinking, making everything a weapon for them. For example, carrying street signs as clubs. And if you remember, these Sings aren't exactly small. His size also made them natural at absorbing gunfire. The fire that they can hold can easily kill a dozen of normal men, and a handful of armed with power armor soldiers is not a joke. To show an example, the Brotherhood of Steel, wearing full suits of power armor and carrying some of the most advanced weaponry in the wasteland, suffers severe casualties every time they engage a Deathclaw pack in close quarters. Now imagine what happens when they have to fight a building that also attacks. If you enjoyed this video and want to see Fallout 3 Remastered confirmed everything we know, click the video on the screen.